Berkshire station, Bryony Lawrence, and another overseas crew. That's Karina Simpson from Sydney University.
And again, brilliant to see international athletes coming over to Henley Women's Regatta. Fantastic that there is an all-women's regatta and showed such high calibre athletes and racing being shown to us yesterday and today. And
so, yeah, and you can see this, both we've moved up a level now, it's championship sculls, so you'd expect fewer problems with steering, much greater cadence at the start from both scullers. It's pretty tight at the moment. It's Sydney that have gone out to half a length, but absolutely being chased by the Gloucester, Hartbury, Bryony Lawrence.
I think what you were saying earlier about the confidence and the working into your rhythm and staying long and is so important, but also even if that is your race planning, you know your base pace is very fast. The start just cannot be overemphasised enough, I don't think, of how important it is mentally as well to get out of the blocks nice and clean and to get as much of a lead as you can in that first 200 metres as possible. And you can just see that I think it's the Sydney athlete that's just easing out.
Yeah, she's just taken half a length there, hasn't she? As we were saying in the last race, settled down into race rhythm, then put in a bit of a push, and she's now a length up as they're approaching the commentary position.
And very dynamic. I think that's what's the really showing about her stroke and why she's taken a length in such a short period of time. Ever so dynamic, really doesn't stop moving at all. Everything's just flowing really nicely, one stroke into another.
We've got, probably noticed, Joe, we've got two Sydney scullers in the championship singles, and Karina is the second of those, and I had expected Fiona Ewing to be the better, but certainly Karina's looking very sharp indeed, because the Gloucester Hartbury competitor has got some pedigree as well, because she a couple of years ago won as part of the quad, the Diamond Jubilee Challenge Cup, in that fabulous quad that we saw. So she's certainly got some pedigree. So this is an excellent performance by the Sydney University sculler.
I think if this is their second sculler, Greg, you'll agree that it's pretty exciting to think that they've got, you know, another one to come who, in their, what they've put down as their A sculler, coming up later on against Nottingham University.
And I don't think we should forget, you know, what an ambition this fulfills for overseas athletes, because they hear of Henley all the time, and to actually compete at it is something that we're talking about 40 years on, or even 50 years on, as I look around the commentary caravan at some of my older colleagues.
That's just up there then.
But it is marvellous. And what a lovely, lovely shot that we're getting from the drone. The ripple of the water, just beautiful.
The shots that we are getting are fantastic and really showing, you know, these athletes in their prime. They've primed themselves all year for this, as you said. Long winters in the rowing world, early mornings, late evenings, and this is what it's kind of the culmination of their season. It is this regatta, for many of them anyway.
But as we can see, it's the Sydney sculler who's taken a rate right down, very much in control now. Gloucester Hartbury sculler is still working hard and still within about 2 lengths, but that's because, as you can see, the Sydney sculler's taken that rate right down. She wants to conserve as much energy, because actually there's quite a lot of racing that goes on, and it's difficult to fuel your body in the correct way sometimes, so you really want to conserve as much energy as you can for the later stages of the races.
I think that's also another psychological aspect of the racing world, because if you have 3 very, very hard races, close races where you've had to push it, you know, going into a final your legs have done a bit more work than your opponents, and again I think it's just a psychological thing to want to try and have marginal gains, and if you can have a little bit less pressure on the legs for one of the races like this Sydney athlete's doing, then you take it.
And we've just seen the start of race. Well, we race
127, I think we're at.
127 Tideway Scullers against another overseas sculler, Capital Lakes Rowing Club. And this should be a good race. Actually, both scullers have got a lot of form coming into this race. Katie for Tideway Scullers was runner-up on both days of the Met Regatta. She raced in the Scullers School first day that finished 10th at the Eights Head, and she's performed well in the GB national team assessments. And we look at Cara. She's competing. She won the Australian University Championships in both single and double sculls. So, Joe, this should be a super race.
And I think the first 200 metres is showing that the Tideway Scullers is just about a length down now. Oh, it's very deceptive camera angles there. No, about half a length between it. But yeah, I mean the power and the confidence that both scullers came out of the start blocks really is showing, all of that experience that they can draw on, because there was definitely there wasn't any tentativeness of those first few strokes, any steering concerns. It was straight on it with the legs down and continuing to do so. And the Sydney athlete, I have to say, keeping the rate extraordinarily high coming out still from the island.
Well, again, we keep talking about it, but it's worth repeating. They just really want to get into control, get that length lead, and particularly in singles, push it up to 2 lengths where they can definitely relax, because when the other sculler looks over the shoulder, we just saw the Tideway Scullers just have a little skelly over to the left just to see if she can still see her, and that's so mentally debilitating if you can't see her just with that little skelly. Capital Lakes Rowing Club, really that length up. Now she's had a super year. She's one of the top 3 or 4 single scullers in Australia. She was 5th in the World Under-23 Championships a couple of years ago. She's going on to the World University Games later on in the year. So she's showing that pedigree here against a very talented British sculler.
And exciting to see a young athlete of this pedigree wanting to clearly progress and putting on a very mature performance as well.
She's still working hard though, isn't she, Tideway Scullers? And the Australian sculler is not relaxing, or not relaxing at all, because she can't. It's just over a length, and that's not enough just to relax. So she's keeping the power on, as you can see from that camera shot there. I'm
sure you've seen it before, Greg, but the races where someone just takes their foot off the gas thinking they're in control and then suddenly they're not, some of the most heartbreaking to see. But this girl's clearly not going to let it happen to her. She really is keeping herself right in contention all the way up until the line. So just started there, we've got race 128, which is another heat of the championship single scull between the second Sydney University sculler, Fiona Ewing, and the Nottingham University sculler Imogen North. Imogen, well known amongst rowing fraternity. She's been with national representation when she was a schoolgirl. She had an injury for about a year. She's come back nice and strong. She's working very hard here to keep with the Sydney sculler. Great starts from both. Interesting to see how the Sydney sculler shares, the same attributes as her peer that we saw earlier go on to win her heat. Just so relaxed, keeping everything moving, nice and dynamic, but really doesn't look phased at all by anything, I have to say. I would imagine, of course, Imogen working hard with her degree as well. She's always been a slight athlete, and she just hasn't got the muscle bulk of the Sydney rower, so she's going to have to rely on her very good technique. Which is showing dividends now by the fact that the Sydney sculler has not got away from her. And she's got, we keep going on about pedigrees, but Fiona Ewing, she's regularly featured in the national under-23 squads for Australia, and she's got many domestic titles to her name. So
if you look at it, Imogen is doing really, really well just to be just a length down at this stage. And I would expect Imogen, if she keeps going and she has increasingly good winters of weight training, she's a name that we will begin to look out for in a couple of years' time.
I think that's the fantastic thing about this regatta. When you're with the draw is random, and you get drawn against someone with such high quality pedigree. It can be quite a scary concept, but you almost learn just as much from doing that as you would racing someone who you consider to be your equal. Got some nice swans joining the match there.
You see, Joe, I don't think you can't emulate this in training, can you? You can't.
No.
So for Imogen, even though it looks as though she's going to be going out at this stage, just to be sitting on that start line, looking across to an Australian national representative and staying close to them for that part of the island, you can't emulate that in training, and that's why it's so important for these younger scullers to come and compete in these events, even though they might look at the draw and think, oh, I've got X on round one, or even if I get to beat X, I've got Y on round two. And so you're building up a mental hardness as well.
And I completely agree with you. It's not something you can emulate in training. And the sitting on the start line, thinking, oh, I don't know what's going to happen, is something that you can only get from these match racing regattas. Even, the 6-lane racing is a completely different kettle of fish to what you get at women's Henley. And Imogen, as you said, doing a fantastic job. She looks an incredibly slight girl, but is, actually sculling incredibly well. So we've just got some results. We're going to round up the last two races of the aspirational quads. So race 1, 2, 4, Thames versus Tideway Scullers, was a win for Tideway Scullers by easily in a time of 5:36.5. Race 1, 2, 5 between the Netherlands Combination Crew and Mortlake Anglia and Alpha Boat Club, was a win for the Dutch crew by easily in a 5 minutes 21.3. Race 1, 2, 6, which was the first of the championship singles between Gloucester Hartpury and Sydney University Boat Club, was a win for the Australians with 3.5 length in a time of 5:57.5. And race 1, 2, 7 between Tideway Scullers A and Capital Lakes Rowing Club Australia was a result of easily for the Australian in a time of 5:50.1. So that's we've got two results to come from the championship singles, and directly we have those results. We'll give them to you as well.
So Joe, on the course at the moment is race 1, 2, 9, the final heat in this batch of the championship single sculls between Imogen Grant of Cambridge University and Elo Lewick of Mosey Boat Club. And interestingly, both of these scullers have raced in the boat race.
Yes.
Imogen, a 2-times winner for Cambridge, and Elo, the first Estonian to row in the boat race in 2016. So a great interest from Oxbridge in this race.
And Imogen really has just gone from strength to strength. All the way back in 2016, she was in the lightweight 8 for Cambridge, and over the summer went, no, I'm going to go for the heavyweight blue boat, and made it into the 2-seat now for 2 years in a row. And she really has gone from strength to strength. She put on her first national senior vest a few weeks ago at the first World Cup this year, and really did show she puts on such a mature performance for still such a young athlete. It's been brilliant to see her come and improve so quickly through the ranks.
As a look at there's such contrasting styles. We've mentioned that a couple of times before. Elo Lewick, clearly a very tall athlete and trying to use the length of her stroke nice and long to power up the course, whereas Imogen, slightly shorter, she needs to keep her rate up and keep bobbling the boat along.
And I think, you know, Imogen is a lightweight. That's the category she normally races under. And you know what? I love to see that someone's gone, no, do you know what? I'm going to take on some of the open weights and see what happens. And she really has, you know, risen to the challenge that she's presented herself here. And she's coming back on terms with...
Yeah, well,
Ella
now
Lewick.
you just saw that probably that Ella Lewick had a bit of a wobble there. And I won't say almost capsized, but it must have gone through her mind, and that's allowed Imogen to come right back into it now. And that would have shaken the sculler quite a bit.
This is turning into quite an interesting race now because they're on level terms again. And I have to say, in the first 200 metres of the race, I thought this was going to be a done deal, but it's by no means over.
And Lewick is much more tentative now. You can see that in
yes.
her stroke. And it's Imogen that's gone past her.
Ever so slightly just edging out. The confidence that Imogen's looking like she's demonstrating, that she's just flowing. The catches are so quick. There's absolutely, as you said, no tentativeness about it.
That's a brilliant race actually by Imogen. She just saw that Lewick had faltered and she pounced. And look at that, she's really pushing it on now, and Ella Lewick is going to have to do something about this. But she just seems to have lost all confidence. The strokes aren't as smooth, they're not as sharp, the catches aren't as good, and Imogen is got a length lead and must be brimming full of confidence. Absolutely super race by her.
And going back to what you said earlier, this is something that you really cannot replicate in training. The ability to read a race, to read an opponent that's next to you, and to capitalise on an opportunity when it presents itself is something you cannot emulate.
My thanks to Greg and Joe there, and also Tom for the earlier shift. I'm joined by Ed Evans now in the commentary position as we're watching the very final strokes of that really exciting championship singles race. Next up we have a round of academic quads.
The academic quads, I think, are always quite interesting because a lot of these scholars will be in their first few years of at least university rowing, and see them here at Henley Women sort of really pushing themselves to race against other crews who may have a bit more experience than them is always really interesting because it often throws up some surprises. And we've seen in previous years that the aspirational quads often look really good and work well together, and often produce some fantastic results.
So the next four races are academic quads. This is race 130, Durham at Amateur Rowing Club A on the Berkshire station, and on the Buckinghamshire station it's Molesey Boat Club.
Yeah, so on the Buckinghamshire station they seem to have taken a easy, quite quick lead actually out of the blocks, seem to have taken quite a flow, sort of flying start out of the blocks. Seem to have already settled into quite a relaxed rhythm actually, so knowing they've got that advantage. And as we were talking about earlier, one of the things with Henley is they could be racing several times a day, and that whole thing about making sure that you've got enough energy for the next race and you've got the psychological ability for the next race means that if you have the opportunity, crews will be advised to relax and take their rate down, just so that when they get to the next round they can really push if they need to.
Passing our commentary position, we're just about a third of the way down the course. It's Molesey with a lead of some 2.5 lengths over Durham. They're now heading down towards the boating enclosure, and if anything they're extending that lead now to about 3 lengths.
Yeah, you can see with every stroke they just take an inch, a couple of inches more, just edging out on their opposition, sort of growing that psychological ability. And sort of really brimming with confidence now. You see them sort of probably start smiling in a minute as they come down, knowing that hopefully, unless something goes wrong, they should have won this race.
Yeah, they're well in control now as they're moving through the boating enclosures, heading down over halfway now, and they must feel pretty comfortable. That's a job well done there, Molesey.
You can see their technique sort of carried them through the lovely long rhythm, swinging around the back nice and quickly. And getting those catches in means that they've really been able to accelerate out over their opposition. And now they will look at, as we said, relaxing down, but keeping that really strong rhythm, just sort of keep their confidence levels up a bit.
I don't know if you were here yesterday, but we had some very, very exciting racing yesterday. If anything, it's a bit cooler today. I was looking at the forecast earlier. The temperature's due to go up to 25 degrees a little later on. Right, down at the start and just off is race 131, Reading University Boat Club A and Cardiff City A, heading down the back of Temple Island.
Oh,
And the steering here, what would you say about that?
I think that's a classic mistake. Temple Island has a reputation of pushing crews off as they come out of the blocks. The umpire has been forced to get out his megaphone by the looks of it. But yeah, Temple Island has this sort of reputation of pushing crews out, because even though the course is relatively straight, the psychological barrier of having those trees over you and seeing the buoys often makes crews sort of overcompensate for steering, and they will have now rode more meters than they'd like to. And that's allowed Reading just to really sort of open up and start sort of controlling this race.
Yeah, Reading went off the start and steered a pretty straight and true course. Cardiff, on the other hand, well, they made a bit of a hash of that, didn't they, to be honest?
They've fallen right back, and they have paid for that. Slightly dodgy start now. Reading seem to have taken it in their advantage. And now seem to be moving slightly out towards the middle of the river, just so they can really not worry about the steering. And hopefully, for them anyway, this will be a nice easy win, capitalising on the strange steering off the start.
Well, Molesey in the top right-hand picture there, just easing their way to a win.
Taking it right down now, just.
And they will, of course, face the winners of the next race, which is just about to pass us now. Reading go past our commentary position now.
I think I'd have to hedge my bets on it being Reading. There has to be something quite incredible from their opposition to bring it back now.
Well, that's another 3 lengths as they pass us. So Molesey go through, and barring disaster, although still a long way to go in this race, Reading University have a substantial lead.
And again, we're going back to that sort of psychological effect of Henley. Reading will have that massive advantage now because they can see their opposition and they can see exactly where they are and how far they are from them. And their opposition, they've got nothing. They'll barely be able to see them. So far ahead, lengths and lengths between them. So Cardiff will really be struggling now psychologically, and it will start to hurt. Physically, not being able to see your opposition, it does start to hurt in the legs, and they'll start to lose hope for themselves almost.
When these graphics come up on the screen, it's as the umpire would look down the course. So the Berkshire side would be the towpath side, and the Buckinghamshire station would be the middle of the river, which is the boom part. Sometimes it can be a bit confusing with a different overhead shot, but it is as the umpire would look down the course. That's how the crews appear on the graphic on the bottom of your screen. Somebody was asking me about that just last night. The next race is off.
Slightly better steering off the start here from both crews.
Yeah, 132 is a race between Bath University and Minerva Bath up against Hollingworth Lake.
I think composite crews are always quite interesting because obviously these two crews are both from Bath, so they'll have seen each other around. But in theory, you're sort of picking your 2 best athletes from each club to make a quad. But sometimes gelling them together can actually take quite a while, and to have a successful combination, you need to sort of have that time together to sort of really fuse as a crew.
And on the far side, over nearest to the island, it's Hollingworth Lake. Their colours, of course, worn by Jess Layden. And it's Hollingworth Lake, probably down by just about 3/4 of a length there at the top of the island.
So already we've seen crews usually using the island to their advantage if they're on the other side. because it gives them that instant advantage. As soon as you can see your crew behind you, your opposition behind you, sorry, you have that immediate psychological advantage. And if you speak to a lot of international rowers, they will say that the main battle they face is psychological, because especially in the coxswain's boats, as soon as you lose sight of your opposition, you have no idea what's going on, and that can be really, really tough for any crew.
And there's now clear water. I think the Bath Composite over Hollingworth Lake, passing our commentary position.
So it would appear to be that this composite has worked well for Bath. They seem to work quite well together. A nice sort of settling down to a relatively relaxed stroke, as opposed to their opposition, who seemed to be slightly more unnerved, slightly more on edge, as they tried to catch Bath. But it's, I think Bath is going to take this one as well.
Yeah, Bath University and Minerva Bath Composite leading Hollingworth Lake there by just over 2 lengths. They will meet the winner of the next race, which is York City and Imperial College. That's due off 11:48. That's race 133. So the drone there showing the gap increasing between Minerva and Bath Composite. And they look now to me as if they're just taking it easy, conserving their energy for the later rounds.
Yeah, a good few lengths of water between the two crews there. Bath will be quite happy with that performance. They'll be looking to see who their next opposition is and see if they can hopefully carry out another one of those races.
So we're approaching midday here at Henley Women's Regatta 2018, a record entry this year, and plenty people down here. There's still room if you're local and want to come down. There's still plenty of room down here on the towpath, but a lot of people here today. Really good to see, enjoying the good weather and enjoying some fantastic racing. We've had some really close racing already this Saturday morning, and we're looking forward to a full programme going right the way through until 22:07 this evening.
I think the Henley regattas, both the Royal and the Women's Regatta, often sort of create an atmosphere that you don't find at many regattas around the country. You know, walking down to the commentary box this morning, you saw the crews on the pontoons boating, and they're all sort of congratulating each other and wishing each other good luck, which is something that you very rarely find in any sport, let alone something quite as competitive as rowing. So that whole atmosphere that's created between the crews is sort of a gladiatorial style, but they have this sort of chivalry between the crews. I think that's something quite special with Henley.
Well, the whole thing is special, isn't it? I was talking to some Americans yesterday, and they were just, you know, knocked out by the whole thing. You know how beautiful everything was, and just how very welcoming everybody is. So, full credit to everybody involved with this regatta. Next race off York City, nearest to us, nearest to the bank, and Imperial College. And they go down, always a very exciting part of the race, that just off the start. And very often steering plays a huge part on those first 15 or 20 strokes.
Both
it's
crews.
Imperial that have gone out very strong here.
And both crews seem to have been pushed slightly by Temple Island, both steering off towards the towpath slightly. They've both brought it back though, and it looks like we could have a quite close race. Though I imagine the umpire will be warning Imperial to move back over in a second. Seems to be moving out into the river a bit too much.
Yeah, Imperial have come off the top of the island there and managed to get themselves ahead by about a length.
Still looking to be slightly like they're going a little too far into the middle, but they might have enough of a lead for the umpire to be happy with that. There's some nice leggings in the Imperial boat.
Yeah, I think the umpires quite possibly warned them, because there seemed to have been a deliberate change of direction there. So they're now clearly moving over to their own side, and still about a length approaching us now. Yeah, Imperial College still striding ahead. They've got clear water now. That's just over a length and a half, I reckon.
Starting to open up some clear water between them, which will give them a massive confidence boost as they go down the course again, being able to see your opposition. It's something really important for all crews. As soon as you can see your opposition, you're in control of that race.
So that's our block of races for this, the aspirational. I keep saying academic. It's been academic for so many years. It's stuck in my head.
Changing it. It's trying to confuse us.
Aspirational. There we go. Aspirational quads. And it looks very much as if Imperial College should go through here to compete against. Well, having said that, only about halfway through, the umpire warning Imperial again to get back over onto their own side, but they're quite nicely in control. They are a pair of leggings, aren't they? My goodness. Yeah. I'm joined now by Izzy. Hi, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you.
Jolly good. Enjoying the racing?
Yeah, it's been good. First time for me at Henley Women's.
Is it?
So very exciting to be here actually today. Lovely to see it.
Good stuff. So this is the last of those quads, as we said. With Imperial College still about a length and a half in the lead.
Yeah, it's not one of the most tight races today, with Imperial really taking that lead ahead. Looks like they've clearly got this in the bag for them, which will be nice. Nice way to finish for them.
Watching the closing stages here of the aspirational quads, with Imperial College heading towards the finish. I'm going to